The schoolteacher heard the footsteps behind her for the third night in a row, and this time she knew it was not her imagination playing tricks in the dimming light of the New Mexico evening. Helena Norwood clutched her books tighter against her chest as she quickened her pace along the dusty road that led from the one-room schoolhouse toward the boarding house, where she rented a modest room. Santa Fe in 1882 was growing, transforming from a sleepy trading post into a bustling town, but that growth brought uncertainty and danger along with prosperity. The sun dipped below the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, but Helena found no beauty in it tonight. She could hear at least 2 sets of boots scuffing against the hard, packed earth behind her, and male voices speaking in low tones that carried just enough for her to know they were talking about her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to remember everything her father had taught her before he died. Stay calm. Do not show fear. Keep moving towards somewhere with people. But the boarding house was still a quarter-mile away, and the businesses she passed were already closing their doors for the evening. A bead of sweat traced down her spine despite the cooling air. "Miss Norwood," one of the men called out, his voice thick with drink. "No need to rush off. We just want to talk to you." Helena did not turn around. She recognized the voice as belonging to Pete Garson, one of the ranch hands who frequented the saloon more than any respectable workplace. He had come to the school last week, drunk and belligerent, demanding to know why his nephew was being taught to read when all the boy needed to know was how to rope cattle. She had stood her ground then, but she had been inside the schoolhouse with the door between them. Out here on the empty road, that door might as well have been 100 miles away. "We are not trying to scare you, miss," another voice added, this one belonging to someone she did not recognize. "Just seems unfriendly, you walking so fast like we are criminals or something." Her breath came faster now. The boarding house seemed impossibly far away. She considered running, but her long skirts would tangle around her legs, and the men would catch her easily. She was about to turn down a side street, hoping to find anyone, when she heard a third set of footsteps. These were different, heavier, more purposeful, and they were coming from ahead of her rather than behind. A tall figure emerged from the shadows between 2 buildings, and Helena's first instinct was to cry out. But then she saw the way he carried himself, the deliberate calm in his stride, and something in her chest loosened just slightly. The man was a cowboy. That much was clear from his worn leather chaps, the hat pulled low over his eyes, and the bandana tied loosely around his neck. He was broad-shouldered and lean, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent under the harsh western sun. As he stepped into the fading light, she could see he was young, perhaps in his middle 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges of his hat and eyes that assessed the situation with startling clarity. He did not look at Helena. Instead, his gaze fixed on the 2 men behind her, and he positioned himself directly in her path. She stopped, uncertain, her breath still coming too fast. "Evening, gentlemen," the cowboy said. His voice was low and steady, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with volume. "Something I can help you with. This does not concern you, stranger," Pete Garson said, and Helena could hear the aggression rising in his voice. "We are just having a conversation with the schoolteacher." "Seems to me the lady is not interested in conversation," the cowboy replied. He still had not looked at Helena, but she felt protected by his presence nonetheless. "Seems to me she is trying to get home before dark, which is a reasonable thing to want." "And who are you to tell us what is reasonable?" the other man challenged. "Name's Nathan Lawson," the cowboy said. "I work the Triple Diamond Ranch, and I have been in this territory long enough to know when a woman is being harassed. So I am telling you kindly to head on back to wherever you came from and leave Miss Norwood alone." Helena's eyes widened slightly at the sound of her name. He knew who she was, though she had never seen him before in her life. That should have frightened her, but instead, it gave her an odd sense of reassurance. Pete Garson took a step forward. "Big talk for one man facing two." Nathan Lawson's expression did not change. "If you want to test that theory, I am happy to oblige. But I will tell you right now, it will not end the way you are hoping." His hand rested casually on his hip, not quite touching the revolver that hung there, but close enough to make his meaning clear. The two men hesitated. Helena could see them weighing their options, alcohol-fueled bravado warring with self-preservation. Finally, Pete Garson spat on the ground and took a step back. "This is not over," he muttered. "Yes, it is," Nathan said, his voice still perfectly calm. "And if I hear about you following Miss Norwood again, we will have a different kind of conversation. The kind that involves the sheriff. Are we clear?" The men grumbled but began walking away, throwing dark looks over their shoulders. Nathan watched them until they rounded a corner and disappeared from sight. Only then did he turn to Helena, and she found herself looking into eyes the color of weathered oak, warm and surprisingly gentle. "I apologize for startling you, Miss Norwood," he said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect. "But I have seen those two around town, and they are trouble, especially when they have been drinking." Helena swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along when you did." "Nothing good," he said bluntly. "It is not safe for you to be walking alone after the children leave school. The light fades fast this time of year." "I know," she admitted, hating the tremor in her voice. "But I have papers to grade and lessons to prepare. By the time I finish, it is already getting dark." Nathan was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the dimming light. She felt her cheeks warm under his scrutiny, but forced herself to meet his gaze. She had learned early in her teaching career that showing weakness only invited more trouble. "Where are you staying?" he asked finally. "Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. It is just up the road, maybe 10 minutes from here." Nathan nodded slowly. "I will walk you there. Make sure you get home safe." "That is very kind, but I could not ask you to." "You are not asking," he said, cutting her off gently. "I am offering. And before you argue, let me tell you that I would do the same for my sister if she were in your situation, and I would hope someone would do the same for her." Helena wanted to protest. She prided herself on her independence, on her ability to handle herself in difficult situations. But the truth was, she was still shaking from the encounter, and the thought of walking the rest of the way alone filled her with dread. So instead of arguing, she simply nodded. "Thank you," she said quietly. They walked in silence for a few moments, Nathan keeping a respectful distance beside her. Helena was acutely aware of his presence, of the way he seemed to take up space without being intrusive. She snuck a glance at him from the corner of her eye, noting the strong line of his jaw, the way his shoulders stayed relaxed despite the tension of the situation they had just left behind. "How did you know my name?" she asked finally, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Santa Fe is not as big as it likes to think it is. Everyone knows the new schoolteacher who came from back east to educate the children. You have caused quite a stir." "I am from Ohio," she said, a touch of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Hardly the East Coast. Anything past the Mississippi is back east to most folks around here," he said, and there was warmth in his voice now, almost teasing. "And Ohio might as well be New York to the people in this territory." Despite herself, Helena felt a smile tug at her lips. "I suppose that is fair, though I have to say New Mexico is nothing like what I expected." What were you expecting? I do not know. Something from the dime novels, I suppose. Cowboys and Indians and shootouts in the street. We have all of those things, Nathan said. Just not as romantic as the novels make them out to be. Mostly it is dust and hard work and trying not to get kicked by an ornery horse. You work with horses, cattle mostly. But yes, horses too. The Triple Diamond is a good-sized operation. We run about 5,000 head across the northern range. Helena tried to imagine that many cattle and failed. The largest herd she had ever seen in Ohio had been perhaps 50 animals. That sounds like an enormous amount of work. It is, but it is good work, honest work. He glanced at her again. Not unlike teaching, I would imagine. Different skills, but the same idea. You are trying to help something grow into what it is supposed to be. The comparison surprised her. Most of the men she had met in Santa Fe viewed teaching as frivolous at best, a waste of time at worst. They believed children, especially boys, should be working rather than learning to read and write. But Nathan Lawson spoke of teaching with respect, as if he understood its value. That is exactly what it is, she said softly. Though I am not sure everyone in town agrees with you. Pete Garson and his ilk are not everyone, Nathan said firmly. Most people around here appreciate what you are doing. They just might not say it as loud as the ones who do not. They had reached Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, a 2-story wooden structure painted a cheerful yellow that seemed to glow in the last light of day. Helena stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and turned to face Nathan fully. Thank you again, Mr. Lawson, for everything. He touched his hat brim again. It was my pleasure, Miss Norwood, and please call me Nathan. Only if you call me Helena. Something warm flickered in his eyes. Helena, he said, testing the name. That is pretty, suits you. She felt her cheeks heat again and was grateful for the failing light that might hide her blush. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Helena. She climbed the steps and let herself into the boarding house, aware of his presence behind her until she closed the door. Only when she was inside, leaning against the solid wood, did she let out a shaky breath and allow herself to process everything that had happened. The next morning, Helena woke early as she always did, washing in the basin in her room before dressing in one of her practical teaching dresses, a simple cotton garment in dark blue that would hide the dust and chalk that inevitably accumulated throughout the day. She pinned her chestnut hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck, allowing a few tendrils to frame her face, then gathered her books and papers and made her way downstairs to the dining room where Mrs. Patterson served breakfast to her boarders. The older woman, a widow who had turned her home into a boarding house after her husband died in a mining accident, looked up from the stove with a warm smile. Good morning, dear. You are looking particularly thoughtful this morning. Just thinking about my lessons, Helena said, which was not entirely untrue. She had been thinking about her lessons, though her mind kept wandering to dark eyes and a calm, steady voice. I heard there was some trouble on your way home last night, Mrs. Patterson said, setting a plate of eggs and biscuits in front of Helena. The butcher's wife told me that Nathan Lawson escorted you back. Helena should have known the news would spread quickly. In a town like Santa Fe, gossip traveled faster than horses. There were some men following me, she admitted. Nathan helped make sure I got home safely. Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly. He is a good man, that one. Been working at the Triple Diamond for about 3 years now. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is always respectful. Not like some of the younger cowboys who think they own the town when they come in on Saturday nights. Helena ate her breakfast quickly, aware that she needed to get to the schoolhouse before the children started arriving. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, Mrs. Patterson caught her arm gently. "Be careful, dear," the older woman said, her expression serious. "Pete Garson is a mean drunk and he does not like being embarrassed. He might try something again." "I will be careful," Helena promised, though the words did little to ease the knot of anxiety that had formed in her stomach. The walk to the schoolhouse in the morning light felt different than it had the night before. Children ran past her, laughing and shouting, their energy infectious despite the early hour. Several parents nodded to her respectfully as they passed, and Helena felt some of her tension ease. This was why she had come west, to make a difference, to help children who might not otherwise have access to education. She could not let men like Pete Garson frighten her away from that purpose. The day passed in its usual rhythm of lessons and recitations. She taught the younger children their letters, while the older ones worked on arithmetic problems. During the lunch break, she helped one of her students, a shy girl named Maria, sound out words in a simple reader. The girl's face lit up when she successfully read an entire sentence on her own, and Helena felt that familiar warmth in her chest that reminded her why she loved teaching. But as the afternoon wore on, and the children began to filter out of the schoolhouse, heading home to their various farms and houses scattered around Santa Fe, Helena felt her anxiety return. She had papers to grade and tomorrow's lessons to prepare, work that would take her at least an hour. By the time she finished, the sun would be setting again, and she would face that long walk home in the gathering darkness. She tried to work quickly, but her students' papers required careful attention. She was marking the last of the arithmetic problems when she heard footsteps on the schoolhouse porch. Her heart jumped into her throat, and she stood quickly, looking around for something she could use as a weapon if necessary. But when the door opened, it was not Pete Garson or his companion who stood there. Nathan Lawson filled the doorway, hat in hand, his expression apologetic. "I am sorry to startle you, Miss Norwood. I saw the lamp still burning and thought I would check to make sure everything was all right." Helena's hand flew to her chest, feeling her racing heart begin to slow. "You scared me half to death. I apologize. That was not my intention." He gestured to the papers spread across her desk. "Still working?" "I have lessons to prepare," she said, hearing the defensiveness in her own voice. "I know it is getting late, but—" "I was not criticizing," Nathan said gently. "I was just thinking that maybe when you are finished I could walk you home again, if you do not mind the company." Helena stared at him, processing his words. "You came all the way into town just to walk me home." "The Triple Diamond is only about 2 miles from here," he said, as if that explained everything. "And I had some business to attend to anyway. It is not any trouble." She wanted to argue, to insist that she could not impose on him like this, but the relief she felt at not having to walk home alone was too strong to deny. "That would be very kind of you. I should be finished in about 10 minutes. Nathan nodded and stepped back outside, closing the door to give her privacy. Helena tried to focus on the last few papers, but her mind kept wandering to the man waiting on the porch. He had come into town specifically to make sure she got home safely. The gesture touched her more than she wanted to admit. True to her word, she finished within 10 minutes, gathering her materials and extinguishing the lamp. When she stepped outside, Nathan was leaning against the porch railing, looking out at the darkening sky. He straightened when he heard her and offered a small smile. "Ready?" "Yes, thank you for waiting." They began walking, falling into step naturally. The evening air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of pinon smoke from cooking fires. Helena found herself relaxing in Nathan's presence, the fear from the previous night fading into something calmer, more comfortable. "Did you have a good day?" Nathan asked after a few moments. "I did, actually. One of my students read her first full sentence today." It is moments like that which make everything worthwhile. That must be satisfying, Nathan said. Seeing them learn, watching something click in their minds. It is, though it can be frustrating too when they struggle with concepts that seem simple to me. I have to remind myself that everyone learns differently at their own pace. Same with horses, Nathan said. Some of them take to the saddle right away, and others need weeks of patient work. But if you push them too hard, they just get scared and stubborn. You have to let them learn in their own time. Helena glanced at him, surprised again by his insight. You really do see the similarity between teaching children and training horses. Living things are living things, Nathan said with a shrug. Whether they have 2 legs or 4, they respond to patience and kindness better than force. They talked easily as they walked, the conversation flowing naturally from topic to topic. Nathan told her about the Triple Diamond, about the owner who treated his workers fairly, and the landscape that stretched for miles in every direction. Helena told him about Ohio, about the small town where she had grown up, and the teacher who had inspired her to pursue education herself. When they reached the boarding house, Helena found herself reluctant to say goodnight. The walk had passed too quickly, and she realized with some surprise that she had genuinely enjoyed Nathan's company. "Thank you again," she said, climbing the first step so that she could look at him more directly, "for walking me home. It was my pleasure." Nathan hesitated, then added, "I could come by tomorrow evening too if you like, until those men get the message and leave you alone." Helena knew she should decline. She knew that accepting his offer would only invite more gossip, more speculation about the schoolteacher and the cowboy. But the thought of walking home alone, always looking over her shoulder, filled her with dread. "I would appreciate that," she said softly. "But Nathan, I do not want to take you away from your work or your life. I know you must have better things to do than escort the schoolteacher home every evening." "There is nothing better I could be doing," Nathan said, and the sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. "I will see you tomorrow evening, Helena." "Tomorrow evening," she agreed, and this time when she went inside she was smiling. True to his word, Nathan was waiting outside the schoolhouse the next evening when Helena finished her work, and the evening after that, and the one after that. It became a pattern, as natural as the rising and setting of the sun. Helena would teach her lessons, prepare for the next day, and when she stepped outside, Nathan would be there, ready to walk her home through the darkening streets of Santa Fe. At first, the townspeople watched with curiosity. Helena heard the whispers, saw the speculative glances. But Nathan never gave them anything to gossip about. He kept a respectful distance, never touched her beyond offering his arm when the road was rough, and always bid her good night at the boarding house steps without lingering. After the first week, Helena stopped feeling awkward about the arrangement. She found herself looking forward to their evening walks, to the easy conversation and comfortable silences. Nathan had a way of making her feel heard, truly listened to, that was rare in her experience. He asked questions about her teaching, seemed genuinely interested in her students' progress, and offered insights that often surprised her with their depth. "You should have been a teacher yourself," she told him one evening after he had suggested a creative solution to a problem she was having with one of her more restless students. Nathan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I do not think I have the patience for it. You have to stand in one place all day, dealing with dozens of different personalities. At least with cattle, if they misbehave, you can just rope them." "I am not sure the parents would appreciate me roping their children," Helena said dryly, and Nathan laughed again. It was during the second week that Helena learned more about Nathan's past. They were walking along the main road, the last light of day painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, when she asked him how he had ended up in New Mexico. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and Helena worried she had overstepped. But then he began to speak, his voice low and thoughtful. "I grew up in Texas on a small ranch outside of San Antonio. My father raised cattle like his father before him. I have 2 sisters, both younger. When I was 21, there was a drought. Bad one. We lost most of the herd and my father had to sell the ranch to pay his debts." "I am so sorry," Helena said softly. Nathan shrugged, but she could see the pain in his eyes. "It happens. Ranching is always a gamble and sometimes you lose. My father found work in San Antonio, managing a stable. It was good, honest work, but it was not the same as having his own place. I decided to head north, see if I could make enough money to help my family get back on their feet. That was 3 years ago. You send money back to them?" "Every month. My sisters are both married now, doing well, and my father is talking about buying a small piece of land again, maybe running a few dozen head. Nothing like what we had before, but it is a start." Helena felt a surge of admiration for this man who walked her home every evening without complaint. He was working to rebuild his family's fortune, sending his earnings back to Texas while living modestly in New Mexico. It spoke to a character and integrity that seemed increasingly rare. "That is very noble of you," she said. Nathan looked uncomfortable with the praise. "It is just what family does. You take care of each other." "Not everyone sees it that way," Helena said quietly, thinking of her own family. Her mother had died when she was young, and her father had raised her alone. When he died 2 years ago, her aunts and uncles had made it clear that they expected her to marry quickly and stop burdening them with her presence. Coming west to teach had been as much an escape as a calling. Nathan seemed to sense the shift in her mood. "What about your family? Are they still in Ohio?" Helena hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding the truth. "My father died 2 years ago. He was a teacher like me. My mother died when I was very young, so it was just the 2 of us for most of my life. After he passed, I realized there was nothing keeping me in Ohio, so when I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Santa Fe, I applied." "That was brave," Nathan said, "coming all this way alone." "Or foolish," Helena said with a slight smile. "My relatives certainly thought so. They told me I was throwing away my chances at a decent marriage, that no man would want a woman who traveled alone across the country." "Then those men are not worth having," Nathan said firmly. "Anyone who cannot see the courage in what you did is too blind to deserve you." Helena felt her cheeks warm at his words. She glanced at him, but he was looking straight ahead, his expression serious. She wanted to say something to thank him for his kindness, but the words caught in her throat. They walked in silence for the rest of the way, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. When they reached the boarding house, Helena turned to face Nathan fully, taking a breath for courage. "Nathan, would you like to have dinner here tomorrow evening, Mrs. Patterson allows her boarders to invite guests occasionally, and I thought it might be nice to repay you for your kindness. The food is quite good, I promise." Nathan's face lit up with a smile that transformed his usually serious expression. "I would like that very much. 7 o'clock. I will be here." Helena climbed the steps, aware of his eyes following her. When she reached the door, she turned back to find him still standing there, his hat in his hands. "Good night, Nathan." "Good night, Helena." She went inside, her heart beating faster than usual. It was just dinner, she told herself. A simple thank you for his protection and company. But even as she thought it, she knew it was more than that. Something had shifted between them, subtle but undeniable, and the prospect of spending an entire evening with Nathan filled her with an anticipation that had nothing to do with gratitude. The next day seemed to drag on forever. Helena found it difficult to focus on her lessons. her mind constantly wandering to the evening ahead. She had asked Mrs. Patterson that morning if she could invite Nathan to dinner, and the older woman had been delighted. "Of course, dear. It will be nice to have a gentleman at the table. And Nathan Lawson is always welcome in my home. Such a polite young man." Helena spent extra time on her appearance that evening, changing from her teaching dress into a nicer gown of deep green that brought out the color of her eyes. She left her hair in its usual bun, but added a ribbon that matched her dress. When she examined herself in the small mirror above her wash basin, she saw color in her cheeks and a brightness in her eyes that had not been there in months. Nathan arrived exactly at 7 o'clock, wearing clean clothes and with his hair still damp from washing. He held his hat in one hand and a small bouquet of wildflowers in the other, which he presented to Helena with endearing awkwardness. "I saw these growing near the ranch and thought you might like them," he said. Helena took the flowers, touched by the gesture. "They are beautiful. Thank you." Mrs. Patterson had prepared a feast, as she called it, which consisted of roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans, and fresh bread. 2 other boarders joined them at the table, a traveling salesman and an older gentleman who worked as a clerk in one of the general stores. Both men were pleasant enough, and the conversation flowed easily, ranging from politics to weather to the growth of Santa Fe. But Helena found her attention constantly drawn to Nathan. She noticed the way he listened carefully when others spoke, the courtesy with which he treated Mrs. Patterson, and the intelligence that shone through when he offered his opinions on various topics. She also noticed the way his eyes kept finding hers across the table, holding her gaze for just a moment longer than strictly necessary. After dinner, Mrs. Patterson suggested they take their coffee on the front porch, and Helena agreed eagerly. The evening was cool and pleasant, and the porch offered a measure of privacy from the other boarders. They sat in the 2 rocking chairs Mrs. Patterson kept there, sipping their coffee and watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. For a while they did not speak, simply enjoying the peaceful moment. Then Nathan set his cup down and turned to face Helena more fully. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. Helena felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "What is it?" "I want you to know that I did not start walking you home just because of Pete Garson and his friend. I mean, that was why I approached you that first night, but it is not why I have kept coming back." Helena's heart began to beat faster. "Why have you kept coming back?" Nathan met her eyes steadily. "Because I look forward to seeing you every day. Because talking with you is the best part of my day. Because when I am not with you, I find myself thinking about what you might be doing, what you might be teaching your students, whether you are safe and happy." Helena could barely breathe. "Nathan, I know it has only been 2 weeks," he continued. "I know I should probably wait longer before saying anything. But Helena, I am not a man who plays games or hides what he is feeling. The truth is, I care about you. More than I probably should, given how short a time we have known each other. And if you do not feel the same way if you want me to stop walking you home, I will respect that. But I had to tell you the truth." Helena set her own cup down with trembling hands. Her mind raced, trying to process what he had just said. She knew she should be cautious, should protect her heart. But when she looked at Nathan, at the honesty and vulnerability in his expression, she found she did not want to be cautious. "I look forward to seeing you too," she said softly. "Every day when I am finishing my work, I find myself excited because I know you will be waiting. And when we say good night, I always wish we had more time together. I thought I was being foolish, letting myself feel this way so quickly. But hearing you say it, knowing you feel the same way, it does not feel foolish anymore." Nathan's expression transformed with relief and joy. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused from years of hard work, and Helena felt a thrill run through her at the contact. "I would like to court you properly," Nathan said. "If you are willing. I know people will talk, and I know I am just a cowboy without much to offer. But I swear to you, Helena, I will work hard and treat you with the respect you deserve. And maybe someday, if you will have me—" "Yes," Helena interrupted, squeezing his hand. "Yes to all of it. Yes to courting, yes to whatever comes next. I do not care what people say, and I do not care that you are a cowboy. You are kind and intelligent and good, Nathan Lawson, and that is worth more than any amount of money or status." Nathan lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so tender, so full of promise, that Helena felt tears prick at her eyes. "I will not let you down," Nathan promised. "I know you will not," Helena said. They sat together on the porch until late into the evening, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. When Nathan finally left, reluctant to go but knowing he needed to ride back to the ranch before it got too late, Helena stood at the door and watched him until he disappeared into the darkness. She touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss on her knuckles, and smiled. The next weeks were the happiest Helena could remember. Nathan continued to walk her home every evening, but now there was no pretense, no excuse needed. Everyone in town knew they were courting, and while there were some raised eyebrows and whispered comments, most people seemed pleased by the match. Mrs. Patterson certainly was, often inviting Nathan to stay for dinner and treating him like an adopted son. Nathan began taking Helena on proper outings when he had time away from the ranch. They went to church together on Sundays, sitting side by side in the wooden pews and sharing hymnals. They attended a barn dance at one of the neighboring ranches, where Nathan proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, despite his claims of clumsiness. They took long walks on Sunday afternoons, exploring the arroyos and mesas around Santa Fe, and Nathan taught Helena to identify different plants and animal tracks. It was during one of these walks, about 6 weeks after they had begun courting, that Nathan told Helena he loved her. They were standing on a mesa overlooking the town, the autumn sun warm on their faces, when he turned to her and said the words simply and directly. "I love you, Helena Norwood. I think I have loved you since that first night when you looked at me with those scared eyes but refused to show weakness. I love your courage and your intelligence and your dedication to your students. I love the way you laugh and the way you think about the world. I just love you." Helena felt tears stream down her face as she looked up at him. "I love you too, Nathan. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I never thought I would find someone who understood me the way you do, who made me feel so safe and valued. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." Nathan pulled her into his arms, and Helena went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other as the wind whispered through the grass around them. "Marry me," Nathan said suddenly, pulling back to look at her face. "I know I should probably wait longer, should save more money and have more to offer you, but I do not want to wait. I want you to be my wife, Helena. I want to spend every day of the rest of my life with you." Helena laughed through her tears. "Yes, yes, Nathan, I will marry you." Nathan whooped with joy and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gently at first and then with more passion. Helena had been kissed before, awkward fumbling attempts by boys in Ohio who did not know what they were doing. But this was different. This was Nathan, the man she loved, and the kiss felt like a promise, like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I will talk to the owner of the Triple Diamond. I have been there 3 years and worked hard. He might be willing to give me a piece of land. Let me start my own small operation. It would not be much at first, just a few head of cattle and a small house, but it would be ours." "I do not need much," Helena said. "As long as I have you, that is enough." "You deserve everything," Nathan said fiercely, "and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." They walked back to town hand in hand, making plans and dreaming about their future together. Helena felt as if she were floating, her happiness so complete that it seemed impossible anything could threaten it. But that illusion was shattered 2 days later when Pete Garson returned to Santa Fe after a month working a cattle drive to Kansas. He had apparently heard about Helena and Nathan's courtship, and he was not pleased about it. Helena was leaving the schoolhouse on a Friday afternoon when she saw Pete standing in the street, clearly drunk despite the early hour. His clothes were dusty from travel, and his face was flushed with alcohol and anger. Nathan had warned her that Pete had returned to town, had told her to be extra careful, but she had not expected him to confront her directly. "Well, if it is not the high and mighty schoolteacher," Pete called out, his words slurred. "Too good for the rest of us, but spreading your skirts for that Texas cowboy." Helena felt her face burn with humiliation and rage. Several townspeople had stopped to watch, and she was acutely aware of their eyes on her. She wanted to run to hide, but her father had taught her never to show fear to bullies. "You are drunk, Mr. Garson," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Go home and sleep it off." "Do not tell me what to do," Pete snarled, taking a stumbling step toward her. "You think you are better than me. Think your cowboy can protect you from everyone. Leave her alone, Pete." The voice came from behind Helena, and she turned to see Sheriff Morrison striding toward them, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "You are drunk and making a scene. Go home before I throw you in a cell." Pete spat on the ground. "This is not over," he said, glaring at Helena. "You tell that Texas bastard he better watch his back. Nobody makes a fool of Pete Garson." "Are you threatening Miss Norwood and Nathan Lawson?" the sheriff asked, his voice hard. Pete seemed to realize he had said too much. He took a step back, raising his hands. "I am not threatening nobody, just stating facts." "Get out of here," Sheriff Morrison ordered. "And Pete, if I hear you have gone anywhere near Miss Norwood or Nathan Lawson, I will arrest you. Are we clear?" Pete glared at them both but turned and stumbled away, muttering under his breath. Helena let out a shaky breath, her knees suddenly weak. Sheriff Morrison turned to her with concern. "Are you all right, Miss Norwood?" "I am fine," she lied. "Thank you for intervening." "Pete Garson is trouble," the sheriff said grimly. "Always has been. He is harmless when he is sober, but when he drinks, he gets mean. You make sure Nathan knows about this, and you too be careful." "I will talk to Pete when he sobers up. Make sure he understands the consequences if he tries anything." Helena nodded, thanked the sheriff again, and hurried toward Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. She knew Nathan would be waiting for her there, as he did not work on Friday afternoons. She needed to tell him what had happened, needed the comfort of his presence. She found him sitting on the porch steps, whittling a piece of wood. He looked up as she approached, and his smile faded when he saw her expression. "What happened?" he asked, standing immediately. Helena told him everything, watching as his face grew dark with anger. When she finished, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I am sorry," he said into her hair. "I am so sorry you had to deal with that." "Sheriff Morrison handled it," Helena said, trying to sound calm. "And Pete was just drunk and angry. He will probably forget all about it by tomorrow." But Nathan pulled back, his expression grim. "Men like Pete Garson do not forget when they think they have been disrespected. I need to be more careful, need to make sure you are protected." Nathan, you cannot spend every moment watching over me. You have work to do, a life to live. My life is with you, Nathan said firmly. And if that means being more vigilant, then that is what I will do. Helena wanted to argue, but she could see the determination in his eyes. Instead, she simply held him, drawing strength from his solid presence. The weekend passed without incident. Nathan stayed close to Helena, accompanying her on errands and sitting with her at church on Sunday. She could feel his tension, the way he constantly scanned their surroundings, and it both comforted and worried her. She did not want to be the cause of conflict, did not want Nathan to risk himself on her behalf. But on Monday evening, as they were walking home from the schoolhouse, they turned a corner and found Pete Garson waiting for them. He was not alone this time. 3 other men stood with him, all of them rough-looking ranch hands who Helena vaguely recognized from around town. Pete was sober this time, which somehow made him seem more dangerous. Well, Pete said, his voice cold. If it is not the happy couple, I have been wanting to have a word with you, Lawson. Nathan moved slightly, positioning himself between Helena and the 4 men. Then say what you need to say and move on. I do not like being made to look like a fool, Pete said. I do not like some stranger coming into my town and acting like he owns the place. I have never acted like I own anything, Nathan said calmly. And I have never tried to make you look like a fool, Pete. You do that well enough on your own. One of Pete's companions snickered, and Pete's face darkened with rage. You think you are funny. You think you can insult me and walk away. I think you should let us pass, Nathan said, his voice taking on a harder edge. And I think you should stop harassing Helena. If you have a problem with me, that is one thing, but you leave her out of it. Or what? Pete challenged. What are you going to do about it? Helena's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the tension in the air, the promise of violence about to erupt. She wanted to run for help, but she was afraid to leave Nathan alone against 4 men. Nathan, she whispered, please, let us just go. Listen to your woman, one of the other men said with a nasty laugh. Maybe she is smarter than you are. Nathan ignored him, his attention focused on Pete. Last chance, Garson, move aside. Pete smiled, but there was no humor in it. Make me. What happened next happened fast. Pete lunged forward, swinging a fist at Nathan's face. Nathan ducked smoothly, his cowboy reflexes serving him well, and delivered a solid punch to Pete's midsection. Pete doubled over with a grunt, and his companions rushed forward. Helena screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the sounds of the fight. Nathan moved with surprising grace, dodging blows and landing his own punches with precision. But he was outnumbered, and within moments, 2 of the men had grabbed his arms while the 3rd began hitting him. Stop! Helena shouted, looking around desperately for help. Several people had gathered to watch, but no one was intervening. Someone get the sheriff. Pete had recovered from Nathan's punch and now stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. Thought you were so tough, he panted. Let us see how tough you are now. He drew back his fist, aiming for Nathan's face. But before he could swing, a gunshot cracked through the air, freezing everyone in place. Sheriff Morrison strode through the crowd, his revolver pointed at the sky but his intention clear. Let him go, the sheriff ordered, his voice brooking no argument. Right now. The men holding Nathan hesitated, then released him. Nathan staggered slightly but remained on his feet, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. Helena ran to him immediately, her hands fluttering over his injuries. You are all under arrest, Sheriff Morrison announced, gesturing to Pete and his companions. Assault in broad daylight with witnesses. You will spend the night in jail, and in the morning we will discuss what happens next. He started it, Pete protested. He threw the first punch. After you lunged at him, the sheriff said coldly. I saw the whole thing. Now move before I add resisting arrest to the charges." Pete glared at Nathan with pure hatred but allowed himself to be herded away, along with his 3 companions. The crowd began to disperse, some people giving Nathan sympathetic looks while others whispered among themselves. Helena helped Nathan to the boarding house, where Mrs. Patterson immediately took charge, bringing warm water and clean cloths to tend to his injuries. The cut above his eye was not deep, and his other bruises, while they would be painful tomorrow, were not serious. "You should have run," Nathan told Helena as she gently cleaned the blood from his face. "You should have gotten yourself somewhere safe. And leave you alone against 4 men." Helena said, her voice shaking with leftover fear and anger. "Never." Nathan caught her hand, bringing it to his lips despite the blood still on his face. "I cannot lose you," he said hoarsely. When Pete drew back his fist, all I could think was that if they hurt me badly enough, I would not be able to protect you anymore. "You do not have to protect me from everything," Helena said, tears streaming down her face. "Nathan, I love you too much to watch you get hurt on my behalf." "And I love you too much to stand by and let anyone threaten you," Nathan countered. "We are going to have to find a way to compromise on this." Despite everything, Helena found herself laughing through her tears. "You are impossible." "I am yours," Nathan said simply. "That is all that matters." Mrs. Patterson, who had been hovering nearby, cleared her throat. "I think you should stay here tonight, Nathan. You are in no condition to ride back to the ranch, and I do not trust Pete Garson not to try something else once he gets out of jail." Nathan looked like he wanted to argue, but Helena squeezed his hand. "Please, it would make me feel better knowing you are close." "All right," Nathan agreed, "but I sleep on the couch down here. I will not compromise your reputation any more than my presence already has." The next morning, Helena woke to find Nathan already up and speaking with Sheriff Morrison in Mrs. Patterson's parlor. She hurried downstairs, tying her robe around herself, and found the 2 men deep in conversation. "What is happening?" she asked. Sheriff Morrison turned to her. "I was just informing Nathan that I have given Pete Garson and his friends a choice. They can leave Santa Fe permanently, or they can face trial for assault. Pete has agreed to leave. He will be gone by this afternoon." Helena felt relief wash over her. "Thank you, Sheriff." "I am just doing my job, Miss Norwood. Though I have to say, this town will be better off without Pete Garson in it. He has been causing trouble since he arrived 5 years ago." After the sheriff left, Nathan and Helena sat together on the porch, watching the town wake up around them. Nathan's face was bruised and swollen, but he was smiling. "It is over," he said. "You can walk home safely now without worrying about anyone following you." Helena looked at him. "But you will still walk with me, won't you? Not because you have to, but because you want to." "Every day for the rest of our lives," Nathan promised. "If you will have me." "I already said yes. Remember," Nathan grinned, then winced as the expression pulled at his bruised face. "Right, I guess I should start planning a wedding then." "I guess you should," Helena agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Santa Fe. Helena wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers similar to the ones Nathan had given her that first evening at dinner. Nathan wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed and his face shaved smooth. His black eye had long since faded, leaving no trace of the fight that had ended Pete Garson's threat. The church was packed with people. Helena's students and their families filled the front pews, and many of the townspeople she had come to know over the past months had turned out to witness the wedding. Nathan's boss from the Triple Diamond Ranch was there, along with several of his fellow cowboys. Even Sheriff Morrison attended, standing in the back with a smile on his usually stern face. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Helena and Nathan exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Helena with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The reception was held at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, which the kind widow had insisted on hosting as her wedding gift to the couple. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by various townspeople, and someone had brought a fiddle to provide music. Helena danced with Nathan, with her students' fathers, and finally with Nathan again as the sun began to set. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson," Nathan murmured as they swayed together. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Helena replied, looking up at her husband's face. "Though I am still getting used to my new name." "You have the rest of your life to get used to it," Nathan said, pulling her closer. They had decided to continue living in Santa Fe for the time being. True to Nathan's hope, his boss at the Triple Diamond had offered him a small plot of land on the edge of the ranch property, along with a modest herd to start his own operation. The deal was that Nathan would continue to work for the ranch part-time while building up his own cattle business. It would be hard work, but they were both used to hard work. In the meantime, they had rented a small house on the outskirts of town, close enough for Helena to continue teaching at the schoolhouse. The house was simple, just 3 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs, and Helena had already begun making plans to fix it up. Their first night together as a married couple, Nathan carried Helena over the threshold of their new home, both of them laughing as he nearly dropped her in the doorway. They had no furniture yet, except for the bed that Mrs. Patterson had insisted on giving them as a wedding present, but neither of them cared. "I love you," Nathan said, setting Helena down gently and cupping her face in his hands. "I will spend every day proving that to you." "I love you too," Helena replied, reaching up to kiss him. "And we are going to have a wonderful life together." The months that followed were some of the happiest of Helena's life, despite the hard work involved in establishing a household and helping Nathan build his cattle operation. She continued teaching, her students thriving under her guidance. Nathan worked from dawn until dusk, splitting his time between the Triple Diamond and his own small herd, but he always made time for Helena, walking her home from the schoolhouse every evening just as he had during their courtship. They fell into routines and rituals. Sunday mornings were for church, followed by a leisurely afternoon together. Saturday evenings, they often went into town for dinner or to attend dances and social gatherings. During the week, Helena would grade papers while Nathan carved small wooden figures, a hobby he had picked up and discovered he enjoyed. The first sign that their family would be growing came on a cold December morning when Helena woke feeling nauseated. She tried to hide it from Nathan, not wanting to worry him until she was certain, but he noticed immediately. "Are you all right?" he asked, watching her with concern as she pushed away her breakfast. "I am fine," Helena said, though she did not feel fine at all, just a little under the weather. But when the nausea continued for several days, and when her monthly courses failed to arrive, Helena went to see Dr. Abernathy, the elderly physician who served Santa Fe and the surrounding area. He examined her, asked her several questions, and then smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Lawson. You are going to have a baby." Helena sat in stunned silence for a moment, then felt tears spring to her eyes. A baby. She and Nathan were going to have a baby. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. That evening, when Nathan came home from working with the cattle, Helena was waiting for him on the porch despite the cold. He saw her expression and immediately became concerned. "What is wrong? Are you ill?" "I am not ill," Helena said, taking his hands in hers. Nathan, I went to see Dr. Abernathy today. I am with child. We are going to have a baby. Nathan's expression went through a rapid series of changes. Shock, disbelief, and then pure, radiant joy. He let out a whoop and picked Helena up, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. We are going to be parents, he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. Helena, we are going to have a baby. I know, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. I am terrified and excited and completely overwhelmed. You are going to be an amazing mother, Nathan said, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. And I am going to do everything in my power to be a good father. You are going to be a wonderful father, Helena assured him. The news of Helena's pregnancy spread through Santa Fe quickly. Her students were fascinated and asked endless questions about babies, which Helena answered as best she could while maintaining appropriate decorum. Mrs. Patterson immediately took on the role of surrogate grandmother, offering advice and making tiny clothes for the baby. Even Nathan's boss stopped by to congratulate them and to assure Nathan that the ranch would accommodate his need to be home more once the baby arrived. As winter gave way to spring, Helena's body changed. Her belly grew round, and she felt the first fluttering movements of the baby inside her. Nathan was endlessly fascinated, spending evenings with his hand on her stomach, feeling their child kick and move. "Do you think it is a boy or a girl?" he asked one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. "I do not know," Helena said. "Though I find myself hoping for a boy. He would look like you." "I hope for a girl," Nathan said, "with your intelligence and courage." "As long as the baby is healthy, I do not care either way," Helena said, which was true. She just wanted their child to be born safe and well. Helena continued teaching through her 6th month, but as she grew larger and more uncomfortable, she reluctantly agreed to take a leave of absence. Several of the mothers in town took turns substituting, and Helena spent her days preparing the small nursery they had set up in one corner of their bedroom. The baby arrived on a hot July evening, during one of those spectacular New Mexico sunsets that painted the sky in a dozen shades of gold and crimson. Helena's labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next afternoon. Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and offering words of encouragement even as he grew pale with worry. "You can do this," he told her as another contraction seized her. "You are the strongest person I know, Helena. You can do this." When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, both Helena and Nathan wept with relief and joy. Dr. Abernathy placed the baby in Helena's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face in wonder. "He is beautiful," Nathan said hoarsely, touching one finger to their son's downy head. "Helena, he is perfect." They named him James after Helena's father, James William Lawson, a child born of love and hope in the wild landscape of New Mexico. Nathan was besotted from the first moment, spending hours simply watching his son sleep or holding him carefully as if he might break. The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. Helena marveled at every milestone: James's first smile, his first laugh, the first time he rolled over on his own. Nathan taught his son to ride before he could walk, sitting James in front of him on his horse and riding slowly around their property. Helena returned to teaching when James was 6 months old, though she reduced her hours. She would teach in the mornings and return home in the afternoons, nursing James and spending the rest of the day with her family. Nathan had built up his herd to nearly 200 head, and with the income from both the cattle and Helena's teaching, they were more financially stable than they had dared to hope. When James was 2 years old, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah after Nathan's mother, arrived on a cool autumn morning with far less drama than her brother. "We have a daughter," Nathan said, cradling the tiny girl in his large, rough hands. "Helena, look at her. She has your eyes." Life settled into a happy rhythm. Nathan's cattle business continued to grow, and he was eventually able to buy additional land and build a larger house for his expanding family. Helena taught for several more years before finally retiring to focus on raising her children and managing their household. She never regretted the decision, though she missed her students. She found that teaching her own children was just as rewarding, and she took pride in James's quick mind and Sarah's curious nature. When James was 8 and Sarah was 6, Helena discovered she was pregnant for a third time. She and Nathan had thought their family was complete, but they welcomed the surprise with joy. Their third child, another son they named Thomas, arrived in the spring, completing their family. The years passed quickly. James grew tall and strong like his father, showing an early aptitude for working with cattle and horses. Sarah inherited her mother's love of learning and books, spending hours reading everything she could get her hands on. Thomas was a happy, energetic child who seemed to find joy in everything. Nathan and Helena's love never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect. They still took walks together on Sunday afternoons, still sat on their porch in the evenings talking about their day. Nathan still looked at Helena with the same warmth and devotion he had shown that first evening when he walked her home from the schoolhouse. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Helena with a trip back to the Mesa, where he had first told her he loved her. The children stayed with Mrs. Patterson, who was now in her 70s, but still sharp as a tack. Nathan and Helena rode out to the Mesa on horseback, bringing a picnic lunch and a blanket. They sat together on the same spot where Nathan had proposed, looking out over Santa Fe, which had grown considerably in the intervening years. Helena leaned against Nathan's shoulder, feeling perfectly content. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Marrying a cowboy, living this life instead of going back east where things might have been easier." Helena looked up at him in surprise. "Never. Not for a single moment. This life, this place, you and our children, this is everything I could have wanted and more. I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Nathan kissed her forehead. "I thank God every day that those men followed you home that evening. If they had not, I might never have had the courage to speak to you." "You would have found a way," Helena said confidently. "I believe we were meant to find each other, Nathan. No matter what." As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson, Nathan and Helena held each other close. They had built a good life together, full of love and laughter and hard work. Their children were healthy and happy. Their cattle business was thriving, and most importantly, they had each other. The years continued to pass. James married a rancher's daughter and started his own cattle operation with Nathan's help. Sarah went east for a time to attend college, studying to become a teacher like her mother, but she returned to New Mexico with a degree and a determination to establish a proper school in Santa Fe. Thomas, the baby of the family, showed an interest in law and eventually became a successful attorney in Santa Fe, using his skills to help settle disputes and protect the rights of smaller ranchers against larger corporate interests. Nathan and Helena became grandparents, marveling at the sight of their children with children of their own. They spent countless evenings on their porch, watching grandchildren play in the yard just as their own children had once done. Nathan's hair turned silver, and lines appeared at the corners of Helena's eyes, but neither of them minded the signs of aging. They had earned every gray hair and wrinkle through years of love and labor. On a warm summer evening when Helena was 65 and Nathan was 68, they sat together on their porch as the sun set. Their grandchildren had just left after a Sunday dinner, and the house was quiet again. Nathan held Helena's hand, their fingers intertwined in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the decades. "I have been thinking," Nathan said, "about that first night I walked you home. Do you remember how scared you were?" "I remember," Helena said with a smile. "I thought you were going to be another problem instead of the solution to all my problems. I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I had ever seen," Nathan continued. "Standing there with your books clutched to your chest, refusing to show fear even though I could see you trembling. I knew right then that you were special." "I knew you were special too," Helena admitted. "Maybe not that first night, but certainly by the second or third. The way you listened when I talked about teaching, the way you respected what I did, that meant everything to me." "We have had a good life, haven't we?" Nathan asked, though it was more statement than question. "The best life," Helena agreed. "Better than I ever could have imagined when I stepped off that stagecoach in Santa Fe all those years ago." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The evening was peaceful, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. This was their legacy, Helena thought. This land, this life they had built together, the children and grandchildren who would carry on after them. Nathan squeezed her hand. "I would do it all again, you know. Every moment, every challenge, every triumph. I would do it all exactly the same way if it meant ending up here with you." "Me too," Helena said softly. "Though maybe next time we could skip the part where Pete Garson punched you in the face." Nathan laughed, the sound warm and rich. "Fair enough, we can skip that part." As night fell over their ranch, Nathan and Helena remained on the porch, holding hands and watching the stars. They had begun their journey together on a dusty road in Santa Fe, brought together by fear and circumstance. But what had started as protection had blossomed into a love that had sustained them through 4 decades of life in the wild, unpredictable territory of New Mexico. They had faced droughts and harsh winters, cattle thieves and difficult births, financial struggles and family challenges. Through it all, they had remained constant to each other, their love the foundation upon which everything else was built. They had created a family, established a successful ranch, and contributed to the growth and development of Santa Fe from a rough frontier town into a thriving community. Years later, when their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate Nathan and Helena's 50th wedding anniversary, the whole town of Santa Fe seemed to turn out for the occasion. The party was held at the ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees and enough food to feed half the territory. People came from miles around to honor the couple who had become pillars of the community. Sarah, now a respected educator who had established 3 schools in the territory, stood to give a speech. "My parents taught me many things," she said, looking at Nathan and Helena with tears in her eyes. "They taught me the value of hard work, the importance of education, and the power of standing up for what you believe in. But most importantly, they taught me about love. Real love, the kind that lasts and grows stronger with time. The kind that faces challenges and comes out stronger on the other side." James and Thomas both spoke as well, sharing stories of growing up on the ranch and the lessons their parents had taught them. The grandchildren performed a song they had written for the occasion, and several townspeople shared memories of Nathan and Helena's early days in Santa Fe. When it was finally their turn to speak, Nathan and Helena stood together before the assembled crowd. Nathan cleared his throat, suddenly emotional. "I am not much for speeches," he began. "Most of you know that, but I want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you for coming, for being part of our lives, for helping us build something lasting here in this beautiful, difficult land. And I want to say to Helena, in front of all these witnesses, that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You have made my life richer and fuller than I ever thought possible. I love you today just as much as I did 50 years ago, maybe even more." Helena wiped tears from her eyes as the crowd applauded. When the noise died down, she spoke. "I came to New Mexico as a young woman, scared and uncertain about what I would find here. I found a home, I found a purpose, and most importantly, I found Nathan. He has been my partner, my protector, my best friend, and the love of my life. Everything good in my world stems from that first evening when he stepped out of the shadows and offered to walk me home. I have never regretted saying yes, and I never will." The party continued late into the evening, with music and dancing and laughter. But eventually, as the guests began to depart and the grandchildren were put to bed, Nathan and Helena found themselves alone again on their porch, right where they had spent so many evenings over the past 5 decades. "Tired?" Nathan asked, though he made no move to go inside. "A little," Helena admitted, "but happy, so very happy." "Me too." Nathan pulled her close, and Helena rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They sat like that for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead in the vast New Mexico sky. The land around them was quiet, peaceful, settled. So different from those early days when everything had been new and uncertain and sometimes frightening. Helena thought about that young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Santa Fe 42 years ago, her heart full of determination and hope despite her fear. She thought about the cowboy who had walked her home without asking, who had seen something worth protecting in her even before he knew her name. She thought about all the moments between then and now, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and challenges that had shaped their life together. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, his voice low and gentle. "Everything," Helena said. "Our whole life together. How it all started with you walking me home." "Best walk I ever took," Nathan said. "Best escort I ever had," Helena replied. They smiled at each other in the darkness, and when Nathan leaned down to kiss her, it felt just as special as it had on their wedding day, 50 years before. Time had not diminished what they felt for each other. If anything, it had refined it, stripped away everything superficial and left only the pure, essential truth of their love. As they finally rose to go inside, Nathan offered Helena his arm, just as he had done countless times over the decades. Helena took it, just as she always had, and together they walked into their home, ready to face whatever years remained to them with the same courage and devotion that had carried them through the last 50. Their love story, which had begun on a dusty road in Santa Fe with a frightened schoolteacher and a protective cowboy, had become the stuff of local legend. Children were told the story of how Nathan Lawson had walked Helena Norwood home every evening until she agreed to marry him. Young couples looked to them as an example of what love could become with patience, dedication, and mutual respect. But to Nathan and Helena, they were simply two people who had been lucky enough to find each other in a vast and often difficult world. They had built a life together, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one act of love and kindness at a time. And in doing so, they had created something that would last long after they were gone. A family, a legacy, and a love story that proved that sometimes the simplest gestures like walking someone home in the darkness could change everything. Nathan and Helena Lawson lived into their 80s, blessed with health and happiness until the very end. When Nathan finally passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 83, Helena held his hand and whispered that she would see him again soon. She followed him just 14 months later, slipping away quietly on a warm summer evening with her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, with a view of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in the distance. Their headstone bore a simple inscription, "Nathan and Helena Lawson, together forever." The ranch continued to thrive under James's management, passed down through the Lawson family for generations. Sarah's schools educated thousands of children over the years, and Thomas's legal work helped establish important precedents that protected small ranchers and farmers across the territory. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried on the legacy of hard work, integrity, and love that Nathan and Helena had established. But perhaps the most enduring legacy was the story itself. For over a century, people in Santa Fe and the surrounding area told the story of the schoolteacher and the cowboy, of how a frightening encounter had led to a lifetime of love. It became a reminder that courage could be found in the most unexpected places, that love could bloom even in the harsh environment of the Wild West, and that sometimes the smallest act of kindness, walking someone home through the darkness, could be the beginning of something extraordinary. And on warm summer evenings, when families gathered on their porches to watch the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, they would often think of Nathan and Helena Lawson. They would think of a young cowboy stepping out of the shadows to protect a frightened schoolteacher, of evening walks that became something more, of vows exchanged and promises kept through 50 years of marriage. The schoolhouse, where Helena had taught, was eventually replaced by a larger building, and that building was eventually replaced by an even larger school. But in the main hallway of that school, there hung a portrait of Helena Norwood Lawson, the first teacher in Santa Fe to establish a permanent school for all children. Beside it hung a photograph of Nathan Lawson, standing proud and tall beside his wife at their 50th wedding anniversary, his hand in hers just as it had been for half a century. The portrait and photograph served as a reminder to every child who passed through that school, to every teacher who worked there, and to every parent who brought their children to learn, that love and dedication, courage and kindness could overcome any obstacle, that a frightened woman and a protective man could build something lasting and beautiful, that sometimes the best love stories were the ones that began not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with simple, everyday acts of care and respect. Nathan and Helena's descendants continued to flourish in New Mexico, spreading across the state and beyond, but always carrying with them the values their ancestors had instilled. Work hard, treat people with respect, stand up for what is right, and above all, love fiercely and completely. Family reunions brought together dozens of Lawsons, all of them able to trace their lineage back to that young schoolteacher from Ohio and the cowboy from Texas, who had found each other on the dusty streets of Santa Fe in 1882. And if you visit Santa Fe today, you can still see the old boarding house where Helena lived when she first arrived, now converted into a museum. You can visit the church where Nathan and Helena were married, still standing after all these years. You can even visit the ranch, parts of which have been preserved as a historic site, showing what life was like for cattle ranchers in the late 19th century. But more than any of these physical reminders, the true legacy of Nathan and Helena Lawson lives on in the hearts of those who hear their story. It lives on in every act of kindness between strangers, in every protective gesture, in every walk home through the darkness with someone who makes you feel safe. It lives on in the understanding that true love is not just passion and romance, but also patience and dedication, respect and partnership, courage and unwavering support. The story of the men who followed the schoolteacher home after dark, and the cowboy who walked her every night without asking, became more than just a tale of frontier life. It became a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to build families, to create legacies that endure long after the individuals themselves have passed into memory. It became a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that unfold slowly, built on a foundation of friendship and respect, growing stronger with each passing day until they become unshakable. Nathan and Helena Lawson's love story began with fear and danger, but it blossomed into something beautiful and lasting. They faced challenges that would have broken lesser people, but they faced them together, and in doing so, they created something extraordinary. They built a life full of purpose and meaning, raised children who went on to make their own positive impacts on the world, and loved each other with a devotion that never wavered, never faltered, never failed. And in the end, that is what made their story truly special. Not the dramatic beginning or the challenges they overcame, but the simple, profound truth that when two people commit to loving each other completely, when they choose partnership and respect and dedication over everything else, they can build something that lasts forever. Something that transcends time and space, that lives on in the hearts and minds of everyone who hears their story. Nathan Lawson walked Helena Norwood home every evening without asking, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And Helena accepted his protection, not because she was weak, but because she recognized in him a partner worthy of her strength. Together, they created a love story for the ages, one that continues to inspire and comfort people more than a century after it began. And that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy anyone could hope to leave behind.